In today's episode, I'm going to be explaining why you can be doing everything right and still not be losing weight.
You're listening to the Wellness Simplified podcast. Simple wellness tips to help you improve your life without turning it upside down. With your host, award-winning fitness instructor, nutrition coach, and wellness expert, Suzi Fevens.
Welcome back to the podcast. Yes, today we're going to be talking about why you may not be losing weight on the scale, even though you're doing everything right. And for the purpose of this episode, I am talking about people whose thyroids are working well. They don't have any hormonal issues. They don't have any other reasons why it could be difficult for them to lose weight. And I'm also assuming that they are coming into their diet, their fat loss, whatever you want to call it, from a place of being well fed so that they have an actual caloric deficit that should generate weight loss. So there are a lot of parts to the puzzle here, but I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this and you are seemingly doing everything right and you're still not losing weight, you know that your thyroid's okay, you know your hormone levels are okay, you know that you were eating enough before your quote-unquote diet that fat should be coming off, and maybe it was initially, but now it is slowed, or perhaps you've been losing fairly regularly, but your weight has stayed the same for like the last week and you're getting frustrated. So, two different issues here. Issue number one, if you have been losing weight for a while, for a month or more, and you have now suddenly stopped losing weight, it is probably because your metabolism has adjusted to your new eating level. It has downgraded. Your metabolism is extremely flexible. So if you are eating a lot less than you were, it only takes a matter of weeks before your metabolism catches on and says, okay, well, apparently this is all the food we're going to get now. So it downgrades so that you are using less energy so that it can get by with what food you are giving it. So that is one big reason why when we do a fat loss cycle, we do it for a few weeks and then we pause, build your calories back up to give your metabolism a break to keep it from downgrading like that. And then you can go for another couple weeks before we back out of it entirely. That's why we do not keep people in fat loss or in a deficit for a long period of time, because all it's going to do is make your metabolism downgrade. And if you never build your calories back up, you never build your metabolism back up, the next time you try to lose weight is going to be even harder. So let's just throw some numbers out here. So let's say that your metabolism has you so that you are burning around 2,500 calories a day. And then you go into a fat loss cycle, a diet, losing weight, whatever you want to call it, and you lower down to about 1,800 calories a day and you stay there for 2 months. Eventually your metabolism catches up and says, okay, well, we only get about 1,800 calories a day now, so we are going to make some adaptations so that we only use about 1,800 calories. And then your fat loss, your weight loss stops. If you continue eating around 1,800 calories, the next time you want to lose weight, you're going to have to go down even lower. So maybe you're going to have to go down to 1,300 calories a day in order to see any change on the scale. But once again, after a little bit of time, your metabolism is going to adapt and say, all right, well now we're not getting 2,500 calories. We're not even getting 1,800. We're only getting 1,300. So it downgrades again. And when it starts doing those significant drops, it's almost like some of your systems go offline. If you think about your phone, and when you start to have that low battery power, it asks you, at least on an iPhone, it says, do you want to go to low battery mode or low power mode? In which case it stops fetching data in the background. It stops like getting your emails and things like that unless you tell it to. So it stops doing some of those extra processes. Your body does the same thing. When you are consuming so much fewer calories, eventually it says, all right, well, we don't have enough energy to have a regular cycle if you're a female, to create or maintain a pregnancy. We don't have room for all these things, so they're not happening. And your hormones get all messed up, whether we're talking about sexual or just regular hormones. Your hair, your nails, they get brittle. All sorts of things happen. So even though you seem to be functioning okay, your body isn't fully online. So that is one big reason, but that is not even really the reason that I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is when you are still doing everything right, maybe you're 2 or 3 weeks into your diet or your fat loss cycle, whatever you want to call it, and the scale hasn't moved in 5 or 6 days, and you're getting frustrated because you know you are in a deficit, you are getting in lots of steps, you're doing your workouts, you're drinking lots of water, you're eating primarily healthy foods, lots of fruit, lots of vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, you're getting as much sleep as you can, you're keeping your stress levels as low as possible, really focusing on stress management and recovery, and that scale is not moving, and you are just about to lose it. This is the point right here. This little point is where so many people are on the cusp of success, but get frustrated because that scale hasn't moved in a few days, and then they just say, forget it. It's clearly not working. There's something wrong with me. And then they go and they get a quarter pounder meal deal or something and just say, forget it. Forget it. That is the wrong thing to do, and I'm going to tell you why. Have you ever stopped to actually ask yourself where fat goes when you burn it? What is actually happening? Because in our minds, we're like, all right, so I ate less food today. I worked out for 3 hours. I know that I burned so many calories. Tomorrow morning when I get on the scale should be down at least half a pound. It's simple math. I know my deficit and I know what should happen. And then you get on the scale and it's exactly the same. It might even be a little bit higher. And you're like, what the F? Like, what do you want me to do? This is the part that people forget about. It doesn't happen immediately. This is not like actually physically taking money out of the bank. As soon as you take money out of the bank, it is in your hand. It is no longer in the bank account. Your body does not work the same way. You may be using up calories, using up stored fat. That doesn't mean that it's going to reflect immediately on the scale. I got the idea for this episode from a conversation I had with Jenna. She was on episode 7 or 8 of the podcast, if you want to go back and check that out. She is on Weight Watchers right now. She's losing baby weight from having adorable baby Kate earlier this year. And back in the summer at some point, she was like, the weight has stayed the same this week. And I sent her a message and I said, you know what? Don't stress over it because it takes a while for these things to happen. And I love my analogies, and this is the analogy I used with her, and she told me when we went to Cirque du Soleil a few weeks ago that she had shared it with a whole bunch of people, so I thought it might be helpful for you. I like to think about weight loss sort of like studying and writing an exam. So unless it's one of those online exams that gets marked immediately and you immediately get a reply, or your mark rather, if you're in school, you might study for an exam. You may go and sit for the exam or write it out, feel like you've done really, 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 really good. But there's still going to be that period of time between when you pass in your exam and when you get your mark back. Your teacher then has to take your exam. They have to go through it, they have to mark it, and they have to give you a grade. And then once all of that's done, you will get the grade back. You have done all of your work. You did your studying. You knew the topics and your curriculum. You went and wrote the exam, but you still have to wait to get that mark. Weight loss is largely the same. You can do all the right things, pass in your exams, so do your exercise, prioritize sleep, get the right amount of food, but you still have to wait for your body to do its end of the job, for those chemical reactions and everything to happen before you're going to see the change on the scale. So you could be losing weight on the scale on Wednesday that you really quote unquote burned off back last Friday. It does not happen in a linear way. And it's important to note that when you burn fat, when you lose weight, all matter is matter. So it's not just disappearing. So it has to come out of your body through respiration and through fluids. So you're peeing it out, you're sweating it out. So that's why, sort of, in the loosest sense, those shirts and sayings that sweat is fat crying, well, it sort of loosely is, but not 100%. But yeah, it comes out of your body through respiration and through fluids. And chemical reactions take a while to happen. It can take a few days. So just because you've done all of your work and you're not seeing the change on the scale immediately, just think about those written exams, like an English exam, one where you have to read through all the essays. Your teacher has to do their part of the job before you're going to get the result. So you are doing all that you can. Then you have to let your body do its part before you're going to see the results. Another way to put it is what we call the whoosh, the fat whoosh. And that's the magical day where maybe your weight stayed completely stable for 7 or 8 days, and then you get on the scale and it's dropped like 3 pounds or 4 pounds out of nowhere, and you're like, what the heck just happened? What's happened is your fat cells are fat cells, right? You use your fat stores, ideally, when you're losing weight. And so your body takes the fat stored in those fat cells and uses it for energy. So initially what happens is your body puts water in those fat cells where the fat was, and just to hold room for it. So when it has some extra fat, it will have somewhere to put it. It doesn't have to stretch out a fat cell, and it's just be ready to fill it back up with fat. And it can hold on for days and days because fat is stubborn. Your body is always concerned about self-preservation, so it's going to hold on to that for a few days. And then when it realizes, well, I'm not getting any extra fat, this person is like eating in a deficit. They're not giving me anything to put in here. So it's like, all right, well, I'm going to take the water out of this cell. And the cell collapses or it gets smaller, and that water gets peed out, it gets breathed out, and that is how you have a big drop in the scale after 4 or 5 days or longer of not seeing any change at all. So the big point, the big picture here is if you're doing everything right and you don't have any of those other issues that I talked about earlier on, just keep going. Just put your head down and get it done. It is the same with anything, whether you're working on your fitness, whether you're working on studying for an exam and it feels like you're never going to get there and you don't know anything, you're never going to be ready. It might feel like you're doing all the right things and the scale's not moving and you're never going to be ready. Just keep your head down and get it done. And if you do that and stick to your plan, assuming you have a good solid plan, you're going to get there. You're going to get there. However, we need to also keep in mind that your mindset and your stress levels play a huge factor as well. So if you're fixating too much on the scale, that alone can cause the scale not to move. I know it sounds like I'm getting a little crazy, but I do like to throw a little woo-woo. But the more you stress out over your weight, the more it's going to stay the same. Your brain is attached to your body, if you hadn't noticed, and they are communicating back and forth. So one last bit of advice as far as doing all the right things and not seeing a change on the scale. If you feel like you are fixating too much on the scale, stay off of it for a little bit. Keep doing what you're doing and stay off of it. And then after a week or two, get back on and see what's happened. And if nothing has still happened, you may have hit that point where you need to pause on the fat loss, on the weight loss, and start to build your metabolism back up. You can keep your weight pretty stable while building your metabolism back up. And then after you are back into a place of being well fed, you can go back into a deficit. Remember that example earlier of the person that was at 2,500 calories and went down to 1,800, then had to go to 1,300. The next time they want to lose weight, if they're still eating around 1,300 calories a day, like you can't function on less. I mean, I can't function on 1,300 a day, let's be honest. But some people might be able to. That person needs to stop and build their calories back up. Like I said before, your metabolism is very flexible. If you go from eating 1,300 calories to eating 1,800 of the right kind of calories, you can keep your weight perfectly stable. You may even be able to get back up to 2,500 calories a day while keeping your weight stable at that position where you were when you were eating a whole lot less. And then when you're ready to go for another dedicated fat loss cycle, diet, whatever you want to call it, you can drop your calories back down to 1,800. You're still getting that big deficit, but you've built your metabolic bank back up so that you are not getting yourself compromised and you are able to keep all of your quote unquote systems online. So that is why you may be doing all of the right things and not seeing results on the scale. Just keep at it. It's like that meme or that photo of the iceberg. You only see the part that's on top. When we're looking at the scale, we're only seeing that little tiny bit when all those other things are happening under the surface. All those other things are happening in our bodies. So give yourself some grace. But if it's been stuck for a few weeks or months and you are truly following your plan, whatever it is, it might be time for an adjustment. That is it for today. I hope you found this useful. Let me know if you did find it interesting or useful. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Suzi Confesses, SUZICONFESSES. On Facebook, I'm at facebook.com/confessions of a fitness instructor. And I will talk to you guys again next week. Have a good one.